Hello fellow lovers of the liminal and the weird, and welcome to another video by Liminal Spaces. Today I'm going to be talking about a very scary short story by one of the best short story writers in the science fiction genre, and that is Fritz Leiber. And I'm going to be specifically talking about the story called Midnight in the Mirror World. I hadn't thought about Fritz Leiber in a while until I recently watched a video by Richard Rempel over at Vintage SF. And he talked about the best of Fritz Leiber with a couple of guests. Also, while watching that, I learned that the correct way to pronounce Fritz Leiber's name is Fritz Leiber. I've called him Fritz Leiber for years. But it is pronounced Fritz Leiber, so if I make a mistake and call him Leiber, that's why. But I'm going to put a link to the video that I watched that inspired me to think about Fritz Leiber again. If you want to go check that out, it's wonderful. It's a really great look over the entirety of the best of Fritz Leiber book. But I read Fritz Leiber a couple years before I started the channel, and I read this Ace Double. On one side it had the Green Millennium, and on the other side it had the Night Monsters. And the Green Millennium is insane and wild, and I'm going to make a video about it soon. This side, the Night Monsters, it was just four short stories by Fritz Leiber, and appearing in, I think, the first collected version that they would be in this specific book. Before this, the story was collected in Fantastic Stories of Imagination in the October 1964 edition. And that was the only place you could get it for a while. And then this, I believe, was published in 1969. Yep, 1969. In 1975, the Night Monster name was published again. This time it included more than just 4 short stories. And then the year after that, in 1976, it was published in The Mind Spider and Other Stories. Very cool cover on this one. Unfortunately, the artist is not listed here, but what a great cover. So, Midnight in the Mirror World, when I read this Ace Double, I loved the Green Millennium. That thing was crazy. And then this story really stuck out to me. So when Richard and his guests were talking about Fritz Leiber, this is the story that came to mind, and I knew that I wanted to reread it and talk about it. And this one didn't make it into the best of Fritz Leiber, which I thought was interesting. This is absolutely a horror story. It is about a man named Giles Neffendor, and Giles is living off of a very robust inheritance and therefore doesn't really have to work, and he marries and has a family and then eventually gets divorced, and all his kids grow up and move away and become successful, and he becomes kind of a recluse and just really starts obsessing on his hobbies. And it's about kind of the isolation of a person and how they start to work on hobbies that become kind of their whole life. And he has 3. He plays piano. He's a pianist. And he plays chess. And he does a lot of chess playing through the mail, through correspondence. And he is a bit of a stargazer. He has a bunch of telescopes that he looks through at night. He sleeps all day. He stays up all night. He does all of his hobbies at night. And he's just slowly fallen into the comfort of his hobbies to the extent that he doesn't really have any friends. When he first divorced his wife, he was hoping for to be able to meet more people, but that really never came about because he stayed home so much because of his hobbies. And I think that is a really interesting thing to talk about. But it's not where the story begins, and the story begins in a wonderful place. And I love that we're coming up on the spooky season because this is the perfect time to talk about this scary story. This story begins with Giles going I think coming down his staircase after stargazing, coming down his staircase, and he has a spot on his staircase where there are two mirrors right across from each other, one on each wall, about 8 feet apart. And he stops in the as he's going by in the mirror and notices in the mirrors that, of course, he can see himself infinitely getting smaller and smaller and smaller in each mirror, which he's seen before. But in this case, in the 8th reflection of himself, he sees a different scene than all the other reflections are presenting. In it, his face is, in the 8th reflection, his face is contorted in terror. And there seems to be a spindly, ghostly arm on his shoulder. And his face is green from suffocation. He feels like it looks like suffocation, so much so that he puts his hand up to his neck when he sees this 8th reflection. It's very shocking, a wonderful opening to a scary story. This is absolutely fabulous, this weird supernatural event. He eventually goes on with the rest of his night and goes to bed when the sun comes up, and when he wakes up, he kind of forgets about it. He says, okay, this is just something I saw. He lives in this old house that's kind of decaying around him, and there's this huge chandelier with these huge spindly arms that are there for decoration with bulbs hanging down from each of them, and there's windows on either side in kind of a lead glass frames, and a bunch of the panes are broken, so whenever it's windy, this chandelier gets to swaying. Leiber did an incredible job on the setting in this. So he kind of forgets about it, but through... I'm sorry, one thing I forgot to say. When he saw this in the mirror, the clock was just striking midnight. When he saw that 8th reflection in the mirror. So he comes back down the next night after he's been stargazing for a while, and he happens to hit the staircase at the exact same time. And the clock is chiming the midnight hour, and he looks in the mirror again, and this time the 7th reflection shows a different scene than the rest of them. And what's happening is, because of the way the reflection works, the 8th, as the reflection moves up, the reflections in front of it are starting to block, so he can't really see his face anymore. His face is starting to get blocked as it moves up. But yeah, now the 7th reflection has this weird, all dressed in black, spooky figure with its hand on Giles' shoulder. And as you can guess, this slowly moves forward and moves forward to the 6th reflection, to the 5th reflection. I'm going to stop here and just say that this is absolutely worth a read. It's perfect for the spooky season, and if you haven't read it, you should go track it down and give it a read. I am going to move forward and tell the rest of the story and spoil a lot of it. So if you're afraid of spoilers, go find this. It's in quite a few of Leiber's collections. Unfortunately, not in the best of Fritz Leiber, but it's in a lot of them. So you might have a copy laying around, or I'm sure you can find it on the internet. Give it a read and come back and watch it, or just continue to watch if you don't mind spoilers. So the minute that Giles realizes that this thing is getting closer and closer, his very logical kind of scientific mind kicks in, and he starts trying to figure out who would have a vendetta against him that would want to haunt him in this specific way. And he can't think of anything, and he keeps kicking stuff around. And finally there's a memory that comes up that he hadn't thought about in years, and that is that there was a woman who came to see him at his house. And her name was Nina Fasanera. And Nina uses the pretext of wanting to start a piano school to come and see Giles. And she is obviously, the way that Fritz Leiber describes this is wonderful, because she is obviously very interested in him, very much wants to be with him in a romantic way, and Giles feels the same. But he also thinks that she might be a little psychotic. He even wonders at one point during this hour meeting that they have if she might be on drugs. So he's simultaneously kind of pushed away, but also drawn towards Nina. And she seems very desperate to try to create a romantic entanglement for the two of them. But he is just in. Apparently, he and his ex-wife would break up and get back together, and they were just about to get back together. So he rejects her advances and pushes her out the door and literally forgets about her. It takes him quite a few days to remember this. And once he remembers it, he goes and finds a newspaper clipping of the fact that she committed suicide the very night that she went home after talking to him during that day. So she hangs herself in her room. And in the newspaper article, she hangs herself in between two mirrors that are about 8 feet apart. And he thinks, well, she saw my mirrors on the stairs, so she might have known that. And this is coming up next is what separates Fritz Leiber from other horror writers, in my opinion. This is so good and such a step beyond what we normally need to see, in the sense that the woman's getting closer to him in the mirror. That's a trope that I think has been done even before this, I'm sure. But Fritz Leiber takes it up a notch that is absolutely incredible. And what he does is he has Giles very scientifically figure out exactly as the crow flies from mirror to mirror, from his house to her house, how far it is. And he comes up with 11 miles and some change. And then he figures out exactly how many feet are between each reflection in the mirror. And he comes up with this number. And then he assumes that this thing can only go one reflection per 24-hour period, and figures out that literally the moment that she hung herself and died in between the two mirrors at her house, she has been reflection by reflection coming towards him. And she died 10 odd years ago. So he figures it all out, and it's exactly correct. She's been taking this trip for 10 years from reflection to reflection, trying to get to him. That's the first thing that makes this story so brilliant. The next thing that makes this story so brilliant is how well he understood the mind of a recluse. And anybody that's had to stay at home, work at home, knows that your brain can get a little strange after doing that for a while. I know that during COVID, when I was home all the time and teaching only through videos, that I, being that reclusive, made me start to feel a little lonely and a little strange. And it also made me really turn to a lot of creative hobbies. And that's what's happened to this guy, although it's not because of COVID. He just has enough inheritance that he doesn't need to work, and he just stays at home, staying up all night, doing his hobbies, and that's kind of played tricks on his brain. And he didn't realize how lonely he is, because what happens is right away he decides that he must have always been in love with this woman, that 1 hour meeting she fell madly in love with him, and he must have fallen madly in love with her, and she's spent this whole time trying to get back to him. And he's so lonely that he starts to obsess over the idea of meeting this ghost woman who is coming through the mirrors. So much so that every night he dresses up to the best of his ability, puts on a tie, and is constantly excited, and he can't see his face anymore. When he first saw it in the eighth reflection, it was twisted in terror, but now he can't see his face anymore. But as the last night comes, when she is just one reflection away, the next night he dresses up, he ties his tie, and oh, I'm sorry, the night before that, he's of course finally able to see his face without another face in front of it when she's in the first reflection, and he can see that his face is smiling, and that her hand on his shoulder seems more like a lover than it does some kind of scary creature. So the next night, the wind is picking up, so the chandelier starts swinging again like it usually does. He goes up and he stares at the stars, and he comes down very excited to finally see her complete her journey of going through every one of those mirrors. And when he comes down, the room is suddenly shrouded in darkness, and it's because the wind is so bad that it's blowing the chandelier, and the chandelier is hitting these two lead glass window frames and breaking more panes, but all the light bulbs have finally been broken out of this chandelier. And he goes in front of the mirror, and he can't see anything, but suddenly he feels this woman's arms around him, and he is just ecstatic, and they kiss, and suddenly she puts her hands on his neck, but it's very loving, and then suddenly one of her fingers turns like a hook, and he is drawn up into the air and starts choking. And we cut to a police officer finding his body later, and the way that the police officer describes it is that the chandelier was blowing, and one of the little decorations that were like spindly little arms caught him under the tie and yanked him off the balcony, and he hung off the chandelier, and that's how he died. As the cop is leaving, he's going down the stairs, and he looks in the mirror, and far off he can see two people, two ghosts standing there holding hands, a couple of reflections away from him, and that's how the story ends. Absolutely brilliant. I love the fact that Leiber looks deep into, number one, his characters. This is a very well-rounded character. You can feel his loneliness. You can see how simply he started as, okay, I'm just gonna do my hobbies at home, and then suddenly it got harder and harder and harder for him to leave. But also the horror is extremely well thought out. That addition with the science of the mirrors and her going from one mirror to the other, reflection by reflection. I can hear Virgil laughing in the distance. I love mirrors, and this is a great mirror book. Just the way that, I think this is the science fiction writer in him, the way that he really mapped out exactly how far each reflection is in the mirror and how long it would take somebody going from reflection to reflection in every 24 hours, how long it would take them to get 11 miles. It's just brilliant. It is really brilliant. I highly recommend this story for spooky reading for this Halloween season. It's great. I'm excited to talk more about Fritz Leiber. I'm going to talk about the Green Millennium soon, and that one involves a strange green cat. I think you'll be into it. I know I was when I first read it. And yeah, that's it. Fritz Leiber. I'm excited to talk more about him. All right, if you watched this to the end, thank you very much. If you liked it, click like. If you like this kind of content, please click subscribe, because we'll be making a lot more of it in the future. Thank you so much for watching.